Okay, telling my story. So let's see. I was born and raised in San Francisco by two what I call hippies, and they did not know what to name me for 3 weeks. So they waited. And my dad happened to find my name in a Rolling Stone magazine. It was somebody who had written a letter to the editor. Her name was Shulin, and he liked it. They both liked it, so they took it down to a shop just a few doors down from the apartment where I was born, literally born in. And it's a Chinese name. So, and my mom is half Chinese, or sorry, my mom is Chinese and I'm half Chinese. And my dad is Jewish. And they took it to this shop owned by a Chinese couple, and the woman wrote it for them in Chinese, and she told them what it means, which it means delicate lotus blossom. They loved it, so they named me that. I did not like the name growing up at all. I wanted to be called Molly or Elizabeth or Mary or anything that was traditionally American. So it has taken me this long, actually, I'm still growing into my name, but I have embraced it and, in fact, realized that it is my spiritual name and it is a prophecy of my life, and I am appreciative of that. So, always been spiritual, and God just sort of made sense when I was little. My two favorite movies, this might sound a little unusual, was The Blue Lagoon. Who can't, love romance on an island with two beautiful young people? And The Thornbirds, actually. And I don't know if anybody can remember back then. This was pre-streaming, when there would be miniseries that would come on TV. So this was broken up into maybe a 5-part miniseries and based off of a novel, I believe. I don't know. I never read the book. But Richard Chamberlain played a priest, and there was a young woman in the town where he served, and they were in love with each other. And it was sort of this forbidden love. They ended up having a romance, et cetera, et cetera. But for some reason, that was my first exposure to religion. Well, not necessarily my first, but for some reason I connected it. And anytime I would think of God, I would think of Richard Chamberlain's head in the sky. Like Richard Chamberlain as an older man, white hair, head in the sky. That was God. And when I was younger, my mom worked at Walgreens. And she worked in a few different locations in San Francisco. None of them were the greatest neighborhoods, and some were worse than others. And she used to work some day shifts and some night shifts. And when she worked the night shifts, I used to get really afraid for her safety. And my grandmother used to watch me. So I told her that I was afraid, and she said, "Well, don't be afraid, just pray to God." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" I was about 5 years old, and she said, "Just put your hands together and say, 'Dear God, please take care of my mom.'" So I did. It just made sense from that point forward. And I used to pray to God in all sorts of instances, to take care of my mom, to take care of people that I loved and people that I was mad at. I would include everybody, and even asking God to help me if I had a test that in school that I needed to do well on, something like that. So it just became this consistent turning inward and asking this higher power for help and support and love and care and protection. And eventually, as I got older, I ended up in high school, I ended up going to a Catholic school for girls. I was never Catholic, but we ended up getting a good scholarship to go there. And my mom was very supportive of education and wanted to make sure that I went to as good of a school as possible. So I went to a school for girls. It was actually a very liberal Catholic school. I had to buy a Bible in my freshman year when I was starting out as part of buying my books, and I actually never had to open it once. And religion class ended up becoming my favorite class because we studied things like mindfulness, meditation, world religions. We even studied mysticism and read J.D. Salinger and studied shamanism. So that was really fun for me. I always just was naturally drawn toward things like spirituality, mysticism, and God. And From there, I actually lost connection when I went to college. For some reason, I just noticed that what I had been calling God or how I had been connecting within, it just didn't seem like it was there in the same way. Um, what I'm finding out is that sometimes, we do disconnect from the ways we've been connecting, so that we can find new ways of connecting even deeper and more in alignment with who we are currently and who we are becoming. So it's really can be a sign of growth, even though it can feel scary at times not to feel connected in the way that we're used to. Um, Eventually, I ended up finding yoga and also meditation. I was actually on a trip to Thailand and had a breakup. Breakups are always such catalysts, right, for spiritual growth. And somebody had given me a book, Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, and it said, just sit, just sit. So I thought, okay, let me try that. I was in emotional pain. I was away from home. And it was the perfect time to try to meditate. So I would just sit for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. And I ended up taking that practice home with me. So when I got home back to San Francisco, I was teaching yoga, but I would pop into my car in between classes, teaching and practicing, and I would just sit and I would set my timer for maybe 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. Eventually, it felt like I started to fall asleep. And I would also get what I was calling like punches in the heart, which I now understand are kriyas or spiritual openings. But it literally, all I knew to describe it was like I was getting punched in the heart. And so I just noticed that I really liked meditation. I noticed that as I was practicing more physical yoga, I would actually go into meditation naturally when I would finally kind of sit down at the end of my day. And I really loved it. It almost felt like just letting everything from the day release. So eventually, as I was practicing physical yoga and doing well, so to speak, meaning I could do the physical postures, I could twist myself up into different positions, but I actually started asking the question, what does that matter? What does it matter if I can twist myself into a position or balance on one foot? How am I going to be a good person? And just asking that question actually led me on a whole other journey where I ended up taking a pause from teaching. I actually found myself, now this was through twists and turns, I landed at the Church of Religious Science. And it was a really beautiful, supportive space because it wasn't your typical church. However, it was a gathering place, and there was a wonderful reverend named Reverend Joan Stedman. And, I was going through a very difficult time in my life. I had basically taken my entire life apart as I knew it, everything that was familiar, and I did not know how to rebuild it or how I was going to rebuild it. Um, and I found myself there. Somebody had actually recommended a foundations class, and I didn't know what that meant, but it felt right, and I immediately signed up. That's kind of how I end up doing things in my life. So I end up at this church, and I start meeting the people and really becoming immersed in the community. Meantime, trying to rebuild my life and really figure things out and asking so many big questions. And I remember sitting in one of the Sunday services, and Reverend Joan said something that has stuck with me for since then, which is never underestimate the power of consciousness. When it seems like nothing is happening, something is happening. And that just really hit home because at the time I just felt like, what am I doing? I'm doing nothing. Nothing is happening. I'm feeling so lost. Fast forward through many other twists and turns, I landed at a yoga ashram, a meditation ashram. And I ended up living there and serving for about 6 years total. I held many different positions. An ashram, if you're not familiar, the word ashram is a Sanskrit word. So it comes from the word shrama, which you can think of Shrama as just like the static and chaos of life when things just get crazy and you have so much noise in your head and it just feels like life is chaotic. You can call that Shrama. And when you put an A in front of a Sanskrit word, it negates it. So ashram, ashrama, we're taking away the noise. So you can think of practices like meditation, chanting, yoga. They're really there to quiet the mind and ultimately also quiet life around us. You know, what's within is also without. So I landed at a meditation ashram and I just immediately dove in. I started serving, I started doing the practices, and those included meditation, chanting, hatha yoga, some study, and some other practices. And an ashram, at least in this case, is also kind of like a retreat site, a retreat center. So as a functioning business, it was a nonprofit, but it also functioned as a business. So it had many of the departments like you would find at any hotel. So I started in the food services department. I was on the serving line, and within a year, I was managing the whole thing. So I was running the kitchen, the serving line, and the cafe there. And we would also do large events, so 200 to 500 people for large events. And it was really fun. And it felt amazing also to be working as service. So there's also a Sanskrit term called seva, which is service to a higher being, service to a teacher, a guru. And really it's service to the God within or the divine within all of us. And it really helps me center myself around work and just that inner posture of how we're giving or how I was giving in any moment in my life. So I lived and I served there for about 6 years between Oakland, California, and then actually was invited to the headquarters in New York, in upstate New York, in the Catskills. And I held a position. I was actually part of a special project to reorganize the teachings department and produce the first live stream. And that was really, really fun. And it brought me to New York. And I ended up meeting who then became my partner for another 5-6 years, Mick. And at the time, we were both already ready to transition away from the ashram. And Mick had a house about an hour away. So we made plans. We had about a 6-month transition plan. But actually, before we were even able to give notice for that, Mick was diagnosed with cancer. He got very sick. And we ended up leaving, and our plans got expedited very quickly. And we moved to his house and a new location and set up life there. So I was with him during his treatment for the next about 4.5 or so years. Chemotherapy, stem cell transplant, and just being with someone who is going through an illness like that. It was big. It was quite life transforming for both of us. And, you know, he and I also had a significant age difference. He was 27 years older than me, which initially was something that felt uncomfortable to both of us. And both of us sort of grappled with throughout the relationship. But something I realized early on is there's nothing wrong with who I love. And that really carried me through. And he and I were bonded, and anybody who knew us, it just made sense. And he was funny. He had a very distinct personality, very distinct sense of humor, a very distinct voice. He used to say things to me like, I'm going to make you a woman, and you are going to turn me into a human being. And in a way, both of those happened. And at times, especially when he was sick, he was really down on himself. There was a record that used to run in his head, and he used to just constantly tell himself, I'm old, I'm sick, I'm broke. And I tried to be there for him through that, and it's hard to change somebody else's mind. He used to tell me or ask me, why aren't you with your vegan yoga boyfriend? And at first I would sort of laugh it off. And then after a few times, I actually got upset with him because I said, do you not really know me enough to know that I love you? And do you not know you enough to know that you're lovable? And he got that. He still struggled, but he got that. And it was interesting because, when he got sick originally, I wanted to project manage his illness. The Virgo that I am, I thought, like, let's get a spreadsheet out and let's make a schedule and let's juice and, make our menus and do this and get you better. And, he kind of stopped me in my tracks because that wasn't how he wanted to approach it. And it was a huge learning for me in terms of, this is not my illness, this is his. And so I realized it was more about being with him and supporting him and letting him make the choices that he wanted to make, and, being there to advocate for him when needed. That was a huge learning curve when he was in and out of the hospital, and just working with the doctors and all of that. And anybody who is a caretaker or been a caretaker, my heart goes out to you. It is not an easy role to have. It's not easy to be in the position of patient, and it's not easy to be in the position of caretaker. And anyone who has somebody by their side is very, very lucky. And I know that also because fast forward maybe 4 or 5 years, then I ended up in my own seat of patient. And so having been there from that other vantage point, there was a lot that I took with me into my own caretaking. And then, new things learned from being in the seat. So it's been quite a journey. I don't know that I would change anything. That's just not my personality, because everything is a learning. Everything helps us grow. But it definitely has led me here today to where being in support in as expansive way as I'm able to for others is really the work that I became clear I'm here to do. Having been through, big life things for myself and others, and found supports and practices and methods and ways of navigating and ways of reframing. So I really look to offer that to those that I work with. And it's not easy, it's not easy being a soul in a human body and experience. It's not easy when outside programming tells us things should be a certain way or that we should be a certain way. It's not easy when outside programming tells us that these are the only solutions and there are no others. But I truly believe, because I've lived it and I continue to live it and I've seen others live it, that we get to write our stories and we get to find our team members. Even when I was dealing with my own health stuff, I ended up interviewing medical staff to be on my team, because I realized I'm not here for them. I'm looking for people to be here for me. And I met with some folks who just couldn't register that conversation. And then I found some others who really listened, and I felt very good about including them on my team. So if you are looking for someone to be on your team, whatever that means for you, and you would like to interview me to see if we are a match, please feel free to schedule a free consult. You can go to my website, link in bio. And I look forward to having a conversation, no strings attached, no pressure, no expectation. But if you are looking for that kind of support, you deserve to have a team on your side who understands that you are the captain of your ship, you are the leader of your life, and whoever you include to be on your team is there to support you, provide you with the best information they possibly can, and support you in making decisions that feel aligned and powerful and full body yes for you. So, sending you love.